Hey guys, Kaz here. How you doing today? Hope you're doing well. I know I'm doing great. Hey guys, I got my friend with me here today, Layla. Layla's our dog, and she's a Chihuahua. She's really sweet, fun to have, a little frisky at times, but very loving. Anyway, getting to today's video, I want to talk about the grid going down and the top 10 things that are going to happen immediately, in my opinion, after the power goes out. But before I get to that, I want to do some history of power outages. Mainly the one that's most noted currently is in Venezuela. Now, Venezuela has lost power for several days, and according to Wikipedia, in certain areas of Venezuela, they were without power for more than 7 days. For most of the country, they were without power for 5 days. There were some areas that were out of power for 7 days. And then there were a few smaller areas that were without power for more than 7 days. And as we all know from the news reports, it's been really bad there. Many people have died in the hospital due to the power outage. There's been a lot of violence. There's been a shortage of water and food in Venezuela. And so those things that are happening in Venezuela would surely happen here in the United States on some type of level. So what I want to do first is I want to go through some blackout history in the United States and see where we're at in regards to an EMP striking the United States and a mass area of power going out. What is it exactly that we're looking at? So I want to go back a little ways. I want to go back to 1977, and in New York City itself experienced a blackout. The blackout itself lasted between 22 and 28 hours. It's not exactly footnoted just exactly how long the blackout was, but it was between 22 and 28 hours. Officials said the worst thing about the blackout is that it started at around 9 p.m. in the evening. This was arguably one of the worst times for a blackout to start at that time, because in 1977 things were very unsettled in New York City. You can do some research on that and find out how true that is. All in all, in New York City in 1977, 1,616 stores were damaged due to looting and rioting. A total of 1,037 fires were responded to, including 14 multiple alarm fires. It's the largest mass arrest in the history of the city of New York City, where 3,776 people were arrested in that short period of time. Many of those people were stuffed in the overcrowded cells. Some precincts even utilized their basements and made makeshift holding pens for so many that were arrested. The damage at the time in 1977 was about $300 million. If you compare that to the cost of living in 2017, it was $1.2 billion in damage. That is just horrendous. At that time in New York City, there was a lot of unsettled things. There was a huge mayor race going on, and there was a lot of anger built up in the city. So when the power went out, it was very, very traumatic. It was like a match to a powder keg, and that's exactly what happened. On the flip side of that coin, the most recent massive power outage in the United States happened in 2003, which was a much vaster area than just New York City. It went from pretty much the East Coast shoreline all the way to Michigan, and then north up into Canada quite a bit. There were 55 million people without power. Now, here's the difference. There was 55 million people without power. In some areas, this power was out for a few days. I remember here in Michigan, it wasn't a few days. It was about 26 to 28 hours here in Michigan, at least in my neighborhood anyway. The one thing that I want to footnote is that I don't recall a lot of violence going on. It's because of the time of the season. It was 2003. It was 2 years after 9/11. And because of that, people were a lot closer together. They were knitted closer together at that point in time in life. We are post 9/11 by 2 years. There was a lot of camaraderie between neighbors and such. Everybody kind of came together at that time. So when that blackout happened, it was a completely different setting as like the mood of the people in regards to what is going to take place in regards to violence and or peace. And at that time, a lot of people were clung together post 9/11 by 2 years, and there was a lot of camaraderie. Now, what I want to talk about is today's time. All right, if an EMP were to strike today, or a massive power outage that would cover, say, like half the nation or 1/3 of the nation, that's what I want to talk about. These are the top 10 things that are going to happen pretty much immediately when the power goes out. Number one is communications are going to stop. Pretty much everyone that we know has a smartphone or a cell phone. Communications are going to stop. Wireless communications and even hardwired communications are going to come to a stop. Computers will shut down. Schools are going to shut down. In fact, if schools shut down and your kids are at school, they may even go onto lockdown, and you may have a hard time getting them from their school if they have electronic locks and so on and so forth, much like some modern schools have now today. The banking system is going to shut down. No ATMs. A lot of people carry that card. They pay everything with the card, with the chip that's on the card. I personally, I don't. I like to carry cash. I still buy things with cash to this day. You may have to barter with silver and gold if you can't get to cash. That's something that you want to think of. Hospitals and medical units may shut down. In Venezuela, like I said, it's been reported that many people in the hospitals there have passed on because they didn't have good backup systems for their hospitals. I know here in the United States, it's not like that. We have good backup systems to our hospitals, but those are short-term backup systems. They're not long-term, they're short-term. Grocery stores will be pillaged. There's going to be no supply truck. You know, we see it in Venezuela right now. There is an urgency for clean water and good food. Same thing's going to happen here in the United States. Grocery stores are going to be pillaged. There's going to be no supply trucks coming in, refilling the grocery stores. And then you got to wonder about people who are on medicine. Pharmacy and medicine are going to be the very next thing that looters are going to go to. People are dependent upon medicine. If you have diabetes, high blood pressure, things like that, where you need medicine every single day, that's going to be huge. And then the next thing you think about is fuel will stop flowing. Gasoline, diesel, you know, everything is pretty much dependent upon gas and diesel if you're going to get from point A to point B in a vehicle. We've seen this before with the hurricanes. You know, there have been long lines at gas stations, and people even fight for fuel. They've fought over just 5 gallons of fuel when there are no resources available due to a power outage. It's crazy. And just like in Venezuela, the sixth thing that's going to happen is water and plumbing. Do you have a well? Okay? Do you have access to fresh water? If you have a well, does your well work without electricity? Do you have a handmade pump or a ram pump, perhaps, that you can draw water out of that well without using the electric pump? And then on the other side of that, we're going to talk about freshwater storage and sewage. If you have a septic tank or a septic field, you know, is your sewage pumped out to that field, or is it just a gravity flow system? If it's pumped out to that system, then the sewage that's going through your pipes in your house, that may begin to back up if it is a pressurized system. You got to think about that as well. Another thing that's real big right now is possibly no GPS, and it's probably going to be, there's going to be no GPS. Again, with your smartphones, if you don't have a hard copy of a map and all you rely upon is your smartphone, then you're going to be in some trouble. You know, we will, in the survival communities, we always talk about getting hard copy maps. It's really important to have those. 911, or rather 911 emergency services may not be available. Why? Because they're going to be overrun by all the looting and all the fires that are going to be caused in the inner cities. People are going to be calling 911 pretty rapidly, and they are going to be overflowed with incoming calls, and they're not going to be able to get to everyone. They may not be able to get to you right away. So 911 and 911 emergency services, police and fire services may not be available to you. Here's another important one. Climate control systems may stop working. If it's in the dead of winter or the heat of summer, how are you going to keep warm? How are you going to keep cool? A lot of people are dependent upon their furnace. A lot of people don't have the resources to keep warm like most survivalists and preppers do. Same thing in the summertime. If it's blasting hot and there is a power outage, how are you going to keep cool? Especially the infants and the babies and the senior citizens. They are greatest at risk for being cold or being hot and then dying off in that setting, because they are the highest risk factor when it comes to heat and cold weather, hot and cold weather. Panic will set in. And when does the looting start? I'm sure the looting won't start immediately, but however, in 1977, they say the looting started as soon as the power went out. In 1977, they said New York City, that's exactly when the looting started, was pretty much as soon as the power went out. It was just sheer madness right from the get-go. In 2003, wasn't like that. It was a little more calm, collective. People were more tight-knitted together. They were a greater community. There was more camaraderie in 2003. My feeling is that in today's time, with how separated we are as a community, with political boundaries and political lines that are drawn in the sand, with racial ties that are going on right now, it is incredibly unstable right now. So if a power outage were to happen now, it would be very much like 1977 in New York City, in my honest opinion. It would be crazy. I think there would be greater violence now than there was in 2003. So when does the panic set in? When does the looting start? And how do you protect your family? Which leads me to number 10, keeping peace at home. Your wife and your kids may start to freak out, and they may start to panic. You, as the leader of your home, you got to keep your family at home together. You have to keep that organized and keep them calm, and get them to understand that this is a serious matter. However, we've prepared for this. We have enough storage in our pantry for this. We'll be able to shelter in place for a while, and if we have to move, then we will. And I've got one bonus thing in here, this one's really scary to think about, and that is that if you are in an airplane when an EMP strikes, airplanes are not EMP safe. Some of their electronics will be affected. And what's kind of crazy about that is you got to think about, will that plane have a loss of control? I'm not going to say that the plane's just going to fall out of the sky, because obviously it's moving, but it's going to come down relatively soon. But it's not just going to fall out of the sky. That's not going to happen. But that pilot is going to have to make adjustments and try to land that plane safely, and maybe not at a runway. So you have to wonder, if you're in mid-flight when an EMP strikes, you could be in some very, very serious danger there. I'm not gonna kid about that at all. So that's my top 10 list about what's going to happen immediately after the power goes out in the United States. I've done some comparison with other power outages here in the United States and what happened in Venezuela. Like I said, my honest opinion that things are very volatile right now in the United States, and that if the power outage were to be in a situation where it is now, if the power were to go out for a few days, a week, 10 days here in the United States, I think it's going to get very, very nasty, and I think it would be just very brutal, a lot of aggression, a lot of hatred towards each other. I don't think it would be like it was in 2003 when there was a lot of camaraderie. I think that if we had a blackout here in the United States, it would be very devastating. I truly believe that in a community standpoint.